welcome to the Femininja podcast, which is a 5-part series co-curated by Feminet and Womankind worldwide to commemorate 16 Days of Activism 2021. Join us as we explore ways to end impunity on femicide based on the lived experiences and activism of activists working in the global south. My name is Marvel and I will be moderating today's discussion. Today, we are honored to be talking to Peace, whose name I don't want to pronounce the second one. I'll just let you pronounce your full names. Tell us something about yourself before we kick off.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marvel. My name is Peace Namayanja, and I work at the Forum for Women in Democracy as the Women Lead and Leadership Program Manager. And I'm a social scientist by education, but also passionate about children and women's rights. Maybe a brief about Forward, or Forum for Women in Democracy. It's a women's rights national non-partisan organization. We believe in a society that is just and fair, where women and men equally participate and benefit from decision-making processes.
A little background on the International Human Rights Day and violence against women in politics. So this is the last day of the 16 days campaign, and this marks the 73rd anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In addition to the topic under discussion, that is femicide and women in political leadership, this is an occasion to underscore the key messages that will have been highlighted during the 2021 campaign. So globally, GBV against women and girls is increasingly receiving a lot of attention with the adoption of the 2030 agenda, mostly known as the SDGs, and the rise of the Me Too campaign movement and renewed focus on sexual abuse and exploitation. However, according to Shen, a former director of policy at UN Women, public awareness and focus on violence against women in politics has been sporadic and belated. And if you agree with me, you know this, that it's never focused on a lot. It's only focused during elections. And according to me, I think that exacerbates the whole thing, because we only focus on it when it's election time. We need to continue focusing on it, so then we lower the numbers of what women go through, that women go through as they face elections. According to Dubravka, the former special rapporteur on violence against women, its causes and consequences indicates that women who experience violence against women in politics are targeted, not just because of their political activism, but also because they are women who are politically active. Further, risks of violence are heightened for women in politics who are from marginalized communities, who they already face forms of discrimination on account of race, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Additionally, ethnic minorities, they face it more than other communities. Finally, on that, violence against women data has mostly focused on measuring domestic violence and its prevalence. But this is changing with increasing recognition that the whole continuum of violence against women needs to be captured, from harassment to femicide. Similarly, violence against women in politics needs to be understood as a continuum of actions. Some manifestations of violence against women are extreme and culminate in assassination, rape, or kidnapping. And I think you're aware of this. You know, it's not just the threats, they culminate into more vicious actions against these women. But most women face less extreme, more systematic and continuous forms of harassment through small, seemingly non-violent acts that undermine their authority and silence them. These acts are easily dismissed, but they are the basis of more violent acts. I think it starts small, then it becomes more vicious. So based on this, the question would be, based on Forward's work, what are the systematic continuous forms of harassment faced by women in politics that lead to femicide?
Yeah, thank you so much again, Ava. And it's great to be part of this discussion, especially as a crowning of the 16 days of activism. Our work as forward, as later, as earlier talked about it, it is more in creating equal participation of women, but also men to benefit processes. Our experience with violence against women, especially when we come to politics, I would mention about militarism. There is a threat that is attached to women who are in politics, but also consequently putting women down, especially in their political engagements or political circles, but also creates enemies out of the difference. We've seen, for example, in Uganda, people who talk about or against women in leadership and women in politics who talk about the current maybe government are usually threatened or are also usually jailed. A current example is a famous activist who is Dr. Stella Nyanzi, the scholar who was jailed for just advocating and for the implementation of a promise that was made by our leaders. And so that is something fellow women in leadership would have come out strongly to really advocate for, because sanitary wear is just a need and a necessity for girls to keep in school. And so the threats that are targeted to women in politics put them down, but also later we've seen certain instances where people end up dying. And so the continuous kind of militarism undermines the exercise of democracy, especially for women who are in politics, but also leadership. And definitely we are living in an African society that I would say is encompassed with patriarchy. Institutionalized patriarchy is still a big challenge, especially to women who are in politics. For women to effectively participate in political discussions, in political processes, patriarchy itself is still it's still taking over. We are seeing that men want to take over debates, want to take over discussions. The dominant kind of masculinities that versus the submissive kind of feminism. So when they see women come out strongly, they feel like your place is supposed to be down there. So the kind of institutionalized patriarchy is also putting women, especially those in politics, down, but also the conflict within, especially women in leadership, the conflict with their, what they said, roles as home roles, the unpaid care work. So most of the times you find that women in politics are not supported by their husbands or their spouses to take up leadership. And so the kind of misunderstandings, the kind of threats also emanate into gender-based violence that definitely leads to death in the end. Yeah, so we've seen a number of such incidences that are really taking precedence. Maybe to mention also about the multi-party system itself. We operate in a country that has so many political parties, but also the different political parties, you find that there is some lack of support from women from another party to another party. They tend to front the party agendas than issues that really concern women. So in the end, you're fighting for a party rather than women's issues. So you sort of have a conflict between women or to fellow women, instead of fighting for a common women's agenda, women's issues, especially when it comes to gender equality. And such threats psychologically torture the women, but also put them down. And in certain cases, death is really targeted to them in terms of threats. So those are a few of what we've come across, but definitely there are so many structural kind of challenges that we've come across. Those are few.
We're always being told, fight for the woman first and think about the party later, because you're the same as the other woman who is trying to get into office. And then also, something we have noticed is when a woman is about to vie for office, I don't know what you think, I don't know how your situation is in Uganda. A woman has to really almost beg. I have a friend of mine who is now running for office. You should have seen the strategy she used to go and approach the husband and tell her she's running for office. But when this guy was running for office, he didn't come and beg. What he did, he just came and announced, I am running for office. All of you guys get into place and into shape. What do you think contributes to that?
I think the patriarchal nature of our society is one of the leading kind of things that lead to communities always reaching out, looking at men as leaders, but also there is a syndrome. I don't know if that happens also in Kenya. It's called the Godfather syndrome. Yeah, it is a thing that for a woman to make it into leadership, you really have to receive, they call them blessings from the elders who joined politics earlier, and those are usually men. And receiving such blessings when you're a woman and they are male competitors, it is kind of difficult for a woman to make it or to even receive those blessings in quotes. So I've seen it that transfers leadership. So if a woman is already qualified but has not received those kind of political blessings, they do not really see you as a potential leader, irrespective of the qualities. So yes, we have. I don't know if that happens that side, but that is also what that is what we've seen this side. Yeah, but also women tend to find that they instead promote the party that brought them into politics. And definitely, when we have so many parties, it kind of creates a conflict, because if a woman belongs to one party and another woman belongs to another party, really pushing for a common women's agenda in such spaces becomes difficult, because everyone is pulling ropes to ensure that it's the party visibility, it's the party agendas that are really promoted. Rather than issues that affect them as women, issues that may concern femicide, issues that may concern the development of the country in terms of women priorities. So such things happen. And so far for us, that is what we've seen. However, for us as an forward, we have a program where we train new entrants, women who are new entrants into politics, and we orient them on women's priorities, women's gender equality agendas, key to focus on how do you handle sexual harassment when you reach through the corridors of power, how do you position yourself, how do you brand yourself as a woman during your legislative journey, such that when they reach these spaces where men where they sit on the same table with men, they are really too assertive. They are able to bring out issues that affect women, and they are also able to really avoid instances that could lead them into a femicide, or could lead them to sexual harassment. So those are some of the strategies we do as an organization.
Okay. On to the second last question. The range of experiences of political life have been the stories of abuse, violence, and the fear of violence that have impeded women's participation and full contribution of political life. Those are, of course, rights. And violence against women in politics is a violation of those rights. We won't have true democracy anywhere without the safe, full, and equal participation of women. This was said by Shen, former director of policy at the UN Women. Now let's reflect on this quote. As we think about this quote, the one that I've just said, that we will not have a true democracy anywhere without the safe, full, and equal participation of women. What ways do you think the governments can ensure safe, full, and equal participation of women in politics?
Thank you very much. I think the government has a lot of things to do in terms of psychologically, emotionally, physically, and financially. And so some even may fail to make it into not successfully elected, but then this kind of torture that is left behind, such women do not have justice. However, what the government should do is, one, is reviewing the legal framework that governs elections and also women's political participation in order to curb violence against women in elections. I know there are so many legal frameworks that I don't want to mention, but there are so many in terms of equality, in terms of the Constitution, the Equal Opportunities Act. They all support women to stand for leadership positions, the affirmative actions, amongst others. And so there is need to strengthen these legal frameworks, but also from time to time, whenever we're having elections, especially for the side of women, there is need to review these frameworks that govern elections, and such that such offenses are put into electoral laws. Because when we have elections, yes, there are these general legal frameworks, but to my understanding, when it comes to elections, we do not have specific kind of legal frameworks that are so much focused on women. But those ones that can have a phrase or a guide on violence against women in politics, or even in elections, because it's through elections that they make it to politics. And then intensifying the civic education in terms of public education campaigns throughout during the electoral cycle to curb the violence against women in elections at various ages. The massive civic education raises civic conscience, but also if government should do, it should be customized to specific groups, and maybe say that this is meant for women, this is meant for men, this is meant for people living with disabilities, such that such incidences are really can be predicted, but also address different categories of groups. But also we have the multi systems in place. And with these multi systems, I'm not quite, I know it's government, but also political parties also have a link in place, specific mechanisms that detect violence against women in politics, but also and in case we have this in place, it expands women's spaces and opportunities to effectively participate in politics when they know that we have platforms that where we can really front violence against women in politics, but there is need for government to spearhead such platforms. For example, the National Dialogues for Women in Politics, such platforms that seek consensus on the issues that affect women need to be really advertised by the government, and also spaces we have religious leaders that are looked up to as respected elders of a country and give guidance on the way in which women can be protected when it comes to femicide, when it comes to the violence that is inflicted on them in terms of sexual, in terms of harassment. Really, they need to be revamped. And in case government takes it on, we need to have meaningful participation of strong women leaders. But in politics, the government to spearhead rather than the CSO angle. Yeah, briefly, that is it. Thank you.
Okay. I think
you've actually answered my last question. But maybe you can give us two last points on what measures can decision makers and state actors institute to strengthen accountability for violence against women in politics, especially femicide, as we mark the International Human Rights Day?
Yeah, thank you very much. As we mark the International Human Rights Day, there is a need to recognize the legislative frameworks globally, regionally, and nationally that govern women's human rights, especially those in leadership or politics. And so as we move into the Human Rights Day, there is need to really pay attention to them as a country, but also as a region, East Africa. And we really don't just keep them in shelf, but we ensure that they are implemented, because those are some of the instruments that protect us as women in leadership, but also in politics, and a basis to which women may negotiate, women may advocate, but also may influence their enforcement to ensure that women's issues, women's priorities are really on the development agenda. And so for me, it's a call to action that should really be put into consideration as a region. I know East Africa, we also have legal instruments that we share. And so, it's really the CEDAW or the Maputo Protocol. They are very, very key and really need to be strengthened, and our regional governments need to be really put on a spot to revamp the implementation of these legislative frameworks. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for taking time out to speak to us on femicide and women in political participation. We really appreciate it, Peace. And I know it's the same as in Uganda. We say asante sana. And on that note, we say kwaheri ya kuonana. Thank you for listening.
All right.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.